evening, Wildcat fans. Here we are at Alumni Memorial Fieldhouse. Wildcats versus the Scouts. Kaiser and Wernick on wings, Nicholson at center, Brown and Neal on defense, and Feeney between the pipes for the Wildcats. Nicholson carries behind the net, along the boards. Neal dumps it in. Scouts carry out of their own zone, out of play. Line change for the Wildcats. Veland, Lee, Alvarez, Frizy, and Miller. Wildcats with the face-off. Miller on point. Cross-ice to Frizy. Shot blocked. Scouts clear the zone. Miller chases. Miller waits the puck. Controls along the boards. Lee carries out of the zone. Neutral ice. Ahead to Alvarez. Lee in the corner. Battles. Scouts clear their zone. Frizy controls. Cross ice to Miller. Frizy controls along the boards. Scout shot blocked. Alvarez controls. Clears the zone. Line change for the Wildcats. Nicholson, Wernick, Neal. Brown on the ice. Loose puck control by the Scouts. Clears the zone, neutral ice. Scouts dump. Kaiser and Wernick now on the ice. Neal controls from the corner. Nicholson controls around the net. Skids forward from the zone. Tripping coming up on the Scouts. 2 minutes for tripping after the Scouts. Wildcats to the power play. Nicholson under center, Wildcats control the puck. Brown shot, save Scouts. Brown at point. Brown dumps it in. Wernick chases behind the net. Out to Neal at point. Back to Nicholson to Wernick. Wernick circles the corner. Centering past to Brown. Brown shot. Save Scouts. Kaiser keeps it in. Nicholson behind the net. Looks to center. Out to point to Neal. Neal stick handles. Nicholson controls. To Wernick behind the net. Wernick stick handle centering pass broken up. Nicholson battles along the boards. Kaiser dumps it in. Nicholson centering pass to Brown. Kaiser dumps it in. Brown battles along the board with Kaiser. Scouts control, clear the zone. Neal controls behind his net. Cross ice pass to Wernick. Wernick to Brown. Brown advances. Stolen by the Scouts. Scouts clear the zone. No icing. Miller controls behind the net. Cross ice to Wernick. Wernick to Nicholson. Nicholson center ice, carries across the blue line. Broken up by the Scouts. Nicholson dumps in. Nicholson coming off. Alvarez on for the Wildcats at center. Frizy controls behind the ice, behind the net. Miller advances cross ice to Kaiser. throws, dumps it in. Alvarez chases in the corner. Scouts clear their zone. No icing. Fries behind the net. Fries in the lead. Lee carries in. Lee stick handles in. Loose puck in the corner. Lee battling. Scouts clear the zone. Shot save, Feeney. Brown controls in the corner. Behind the net to Miller. Miller skates out. Ahead to Lee. Scouts control neutral ice. Brown controls along the boards. Scouts save. Got shot save.
That's a tough one. Scout save.
Alvarez at center. Neal and Shulkin on defense. Miller on wing. Brown and Neal on defense. Shulkin, Lee, and Alvarez. Alvarez under center. Controls the draw. Lee's puck in front of the net. Scout save. Scout shot save. Feeney.
Give me a try.
Line change for the Falcons. Nicholson, Kaiser, and Warwick on the ice.
Stop, everybody.
Nicholson under center, controls the puck. Nicholson behind the net, reverses. Catch broken up on the Scouts. Scouts dump in behind the net. Nicholson controls. In the corner, battling. Nicholson behind the net. Good zone dance in the middle ice. Skates into the scout zone. Looks to center. Broken up. Nicholson behind the net. Neal at point. Broken up by the Scouts. Battling along the boards. Neal controls. Kaiser and Neal. Wernick battling along the boards. Nicholson at point. Nicholson shot. Save Scouts. Miller now on the ice for blocking the defense, along with Frizy. Scouts control, kept in by Miller. Loose puck in front of the net. Frizy controls. Centering pass broken up. Wernick in the corner to Nicholson. Nicholson behind the net. Nicholson stick handles, reverses. Kaiser along the boards. Cross ice to Frizy. Frizy on point, shot blocked. Kaiser dumps it in. Line change for the Kits. Bostwick on the ice now for Wernick. Nicholson controls in the corner. Bostwick behind the net controls. Kaiser controls along the boards. Scouts control. Scouts advance. Scouts dump it in. Bostwick controls in the corner. Looks to clear, broken up on the Scouts. Scouts dump in. Frizy controls, advancing to Kaiser. Kaiser neutral ice, dumps it in. Wildcats line change. Alvarez, Bostwick, Neal, Brown, and Lee on the ice. Brown controls, dumps in. Alvarez chases behind the net. Centering pass broken up. Alvarez controls along the board. To Brown at point. Brown shot. Blocked. Neal controls along the board. Dumps in. Neal and Boswick battling along the boards. Loose puck to the Scouts. Scouts control behind their net. Look to clear their zone. Kept in by Brown. Brown dumps in around the back of the net. Lee battles in the corner. Loose puck to Boswick. Lee controls. Lee in the corner. Lee battles in the corner. Scouts advance center ice. Scouts control behind the puck. It's net. Brown in pursuit, centering pass, broken up. Cross-checking on Alvarez. Scouts in the power play.
Back on.
Nicholson under center. Shot behind the net. Miller controls. Miller ahead to Kaiser. Puck clears the zone. Kaiser chases. Scouts behind the net. Kaiser in pursuit. Scouts ahead. Neutralized. Nicholson controls. Nicholson advances in the scout zone. Kaiser keeps it in. Neutralized. Miller dumps it in. Scouts control along the board. Cross ice pass. Clear their zone. Scouts advance in the Wildcat zone. Kaiser dumps it in. 1:05 was in the power play. Brown now on the ice for the Wildcats. Kaiser keeps it in. Kaiser skates in. Broken up by the Scouts. Scouts control the puck out of their zone. Cross-ice pass. Scout shot blocked by Miller. Scouts control. Kaiser clears the zone. Nope, does not clear the zone. Scout shot, save Feeney. Pass on the boards. Miller controls behind the net. Miller clears the zone. 20 seconds left in the Scouts power play. Neal, Lee, and Wernick now on the ice. Cross ice pass by the Scouts. Broken up by Neal. Scouts advancing the Wildcat zone. Scouts stick handle in. Shot behind the net, wide. Neal controls. Neal to Wernick. Wernick advances to the zone. Wildcats now at full strength. Lee breaks up the pass. Dumps in, Neal pursues. Neal controls it to clear the zone. Broken up by Neal in the slot. Brown clears the zone. Lee in pursuit. Line change for the Wildcats. Lang now on the ice. Neal controls center ice. Cross ice to Lang. Lang dumps in. Scouts control. Broken up. Neal controls in his own zone. Cross ice to Lee. Loose puck center ice. Scout shot. Save Feeney. Brown controls along the boards. Lang cross ice pass. Broken up by the Scouts. Scouts dump in. Neal clears the zone. Wernick, Nicholson, and Miller now on the ice for the Wildcats. Scouts shot blocked wide of the net. Scouts control behind the net. Nicholson behind the net along the boards. Nicholson battles. controls, looks to clear the zone. Nicholson to center ice. Pass to Lang. Lang shot. Save Scouts. Nicholson to Frizy. Frizy center ice. Cross ice to Warnick. Warnick shot. Save Scouts. Scouts control. Puck neutral ice, Scouts control, Phelan chases, Scouts dump in, Miller controls behind the net, Miller cross ice, Phelan broken up, Scouts keep it in, Scouts stick handle in, Miller back on defense, loose puck along the boards, Kaiser battles, Miller behind the net, Frizy reverses to Nicholson, Nicholson to Kaiser. Kaiser clears the zone. Icing coming up on the Wildcats.
That's a long, uninterrupted segment of play right there.
Shot wide by the Scouts. Center pass broken up by Miller. Miller passes to Phelan. Phelan center ice. Phelan carries in, centering pass to Lee, broken up. Lee chasing in the corner. Scouts control behind the net. Cross ice pass broken up by the Wildcats. Lee keeps it in. Scouts clear the zone. Frizy controls neutral ice. Cross ice to Neal. Neal chases along the boards. Loose puck center ice. Scouts dump it in. Period. Nicholson under center. Warnick and Kaiser at wing. Neal and Brown at defense. off control by the Scouts, controlled center ice. Poked away by Kaiser. Kaiser in pursuit in the Scout zone. Kaiser skates in, looks to center behind the net. Stick handles, reverses to Warnick behind the net. Warnick controls. Warnick stick handles, at point to Brown. Brown shot, save, and cover by the Scouts.
This is something new. The Casper Slide Part 2, featuring the Platinum Band. And this time, we're gonna get funky. Funky. Everybody clap your hands. Clap, 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 clap your hands. Clap, 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 clap your hands. All right, now, we're gonna do the basic step. To the left.
Same five for the Wildcats. Wildcats control. Neal at point. Cross ice to Brown. Brown looks to keep it in. Scouts for the zone. Scouts advance. Scouts miss shot. Neal controls along the boards. Looks to clear the zone. Middle ice to Wernick. Loose puck middle ice. Brown battles along the boards. Scouts control. Scouts into the Wildcat zone. Nicholson in pursuit. Check along the board. Centering pass. Broken up. Kaiser in the corner. Kaiser clears the zone. Icing on the Wildcat. Line change for the Wildcats. Lee, Miller, Alvarez, Shulkin, and Friese on the ice. Lee chases into the Scout zone. Scouts clear. Alvarez chases along the boards. Alvarez controls in the corner, battles with the Scouts. Behind the net. Puck behind the net. Scouts clear the zone. Scouts advance neutral ice. Broken up by Friese. Scout shot blocked behind the net. Saved by Feeney. Scout shot. Pad save Feeney. Shot again. Loose puck in front of the net. Saved by Feeney again. Loose puck behind the net. Scouts control. Centering pass broken up by Friese.
Yeah. I didn't see what they did.
Kaiser controls. Kaiser stick handles. Cross right to Brown. Brown shot. Wernick for the goal! Power play goal for the Wildcats. Wernick on the goal off the rebound. Nicholson under center. Kaiser and Wernick on the wing. Brown and Neal on defense. Kaiser controls. Neal on point. Neal stick handles in. Neal dumps into Kaiser in the corner. Centering pass to Caleb, broken up. Scouts clear the zone. Neal controls behind the net. Loose puck behind the net. Caleb controls. Nicholson to Brown. Brown to Wernick. Wernick to Kaiser. Kaiser advances. Center to Nicholson. Broken up by the Scouts. Saved by the Scouts. It was fucking broken up there. Feeney controls, Feeney covers. Alvarez under center wins the draw. Miller controls in the corner. Loose puck along the boards. Wildcats clear the zone. Boswick on the forecheck. Alvarez chases. Kept in along the board by Alvarez. Scouts control out of their own zone. Alvarez steals. Alvarez skates in. Boswick in the middle, shot blocked by the Scouts. Boswick controls in the corner. Centering pass to Frizy. Frizy shot blocked. Boswick controls, centering pass broken up by the Scouts. Lee controls. Scouts clear the zone. Frizy along the boards. Miller controls to Boswick. Miller carries out of the Wildcats zone, center ice. Miller dumps it in. Line change for the Wildcats. Nicholson, Wernick, Brown, and Kaiser on the ice. Pass broken up by Kaiser on the play. Nicholson controls in the corner. Loose puck in the corner. Nicholson controls. Loose puck in the corner. Kaiser battles. Neal controls that point. Neal dumps in. Behind the net. Kaiser controls behind the net. Broken up by the Scouts. Scouts along the boards. Neal keeps it in. Scouts clear the zone. Scouts advance. Brown back on defense. Shot wide around the boards. Scouts keep it in. Dump in. Brown along the board. Centering pass. Neal breaks it up. Loose puck in front of the ice. Loose puck behind the net. Neal controls. Neal along the boards. Scouts at point. Shot wide. Scouts keep it in. Scouts dump in along the boards. Neal in pursuit in the corner. Neal controls, clears the zone, icing on the Wildcats. Line change for the Wildcats. Alvarez, Lee, and Lang. Loose puck in front of the ice. Frizy controls. Scouts dump it in. Frizy and Miller on defense now for the Scouts. Scouts keep it in. Scouts centering pass broken up by Lee. Miller clears the zone. Lee chases. Alvarez along the boards, behind the net. Lee controls along the boards. Miller keeps it in. Miller skates in, shot, saved by Scouts. Scouts dump ahead. Frizy over to Miller. Miller controls along the boards. Kaiser controls center ice. Over to Nicholson. Nicholson dumps in. Wernick in the corner controls. Puck in the corner. Kaiser along the boards to Nicholson. Nicholson battles with Kaiser. Scouts control behind the net. Nicholson battles. Scouts score their zone. Miller and Brown chase on defense. Scouts control the corner. Brown breaks it up behind the net. Loose puck, Nicholson controls. Nicholson skates out of his own zone. Nicholson clears the zone. Kaiser chases. Nicholson controls center ice. Nicholson dumps in. Line change for the Wildcats. Veland now on the ice. Kaiser controls. I had to deal with mid pass. Scouts control. Scouts dump into the Wildcats zone. Miller controls along the boards of Nicholson. Nicholson advances out of his own zone. Nicholson stick handle. Nicholson dumps it in behind the net. Veland chases along the boards. Veland and Nicholson behind the net. Veland pursues. Loose puck behind the net. Brown to Neal. Neal controls. Neal cross ice, broken up. Brown controls behind the net. Brown looks to clear the zone, broken up by the Scouts. Scouts control. Lee controls out of the zone. Lee chases in the corner. Lee in the corner, looks to center. Lee along the boards. Scouts control out of their own zone. Brown and Neal back on defense. Shot wide by the Scouts. Scouts control at the point. Centering pass shot, Scouts. Cover save by Feeney. Five for the Wildcats. Alvarez under center. Boswick and Lee at wing. Frizy and Miller on defense. Lee controls out of his own zone. Cross ice to Boswick. Loose puck center ice. Alvarez dumps in. Loose puck center ice. Scouts advance. Scout shot. Save Feeney. Boswick controls behind the net. Boswick skates out. Scouts keep it in. Scouts dump the puck in. Miller controls along the boards. Scout shot. Save. Behind the net. Scout control behind the net. Scout shot. Save. Feeney. Shulkin under center, Boswick, Neal, Lang, and Brown on the ice for the Wildcats. Neal in pursuit along the board. Neal battling along the boards. Scouts shot wide of the net. Scouts control. Scout shot broken up. Loose puck in front of the net. Shot save. Cover Feeney. Nicholson, Wernick, and Kaiser now on the ice. Scouts keep it in. Scout shot, save Feeney, cover Feeney. Nicholson under center. Scouts at the point. Scout shot blocked. Wernick control. Skates out of his own zone. Loose puck. Scout control. Centering pass broken up. Brown controls. Brown skates into the scout zone. Over to Wernick. To Nicholson. Nicholson stick handles at the dot. Centering pass broken up. Neal looks to keep it in. Scouts for the zone. Kaiser controls in his own zone. Cross ice to Brown. Brown. Scouts control the puck center ice. Nicholson intercept pass. Nicholson and Wernick. Shot off the post. Centering pass. Scouts control center ice. Scouts advance. Shot. Pad save Feeney. Brown controls. Behind the net to Neal. Neal clears the zone, icing Watkins. Miller and Friese on defense, Lee and Phelan at wing, Alvarez at center. Scouts control the draw. Scouts keep it in. Miller clears the zone. Scouts clear center ice. Wheeler pursues cross ice. Alvarez stick handles in. Alvarez slot center pass broken up. Lee in pursuit. Lee battles along the boards. Scouts control their own zone. Miller broken up. Phelan controls center ice. Phelan stick handles in. Phelan shot. Save. Scouts cover. Same class for Wildcats. Alvarez under center. Lee and Phelan at wing. Miller and Friese on defense. Alvarez shot, save, Scouts.
This is one eclectic mix.
Wildcats with the draw. Friese at point. Cross ice to Miller. Miller shot, deflected. Phelan in the corner. Phelan and Lee along the boards. Miller keeps it in. Scouts clear the zone. Friese back on defense. Shot. Goal, Scouts. Line change to the Wildcats. Nicholson under center. Wernick and Kaiser at wing. Neal and Brown on defense. Neal controls center ice. Scouts advance. Broken up by Neal. Brown breaks up. Brown skates in with Wernick on middle shot. Save. Wildcats control center ice, cross ice, Neal to Nicholson. Nicholson controls, advances head to Kaiser. Kaiser skates in. Kaiser dumps in. Chases behind the net. Nicholson out to check. Brown controls the slot. 2 minutes to Nicholson for boarding. Scouts in the power play, Wernick, Neal, Kaiser, and Brown. Scout shot, Faye Feeney. Scout control, scouts at point, scout shot, Faye Feeney. Loose puck behind the net. Behind the net still. Loose puck along the side of the net. Centering pass broken up by the Wildcats. Scouts keep it in, shot blocked. Net out of play. Lee, Miller, and Friese on the ice now for the Wildcats. Kaiser under center. Scouts control along the boards. Kaiser carries out of his own zone. Kaiser jumps in and chases. Kaiser behind the net. Lee chases below the board, keeps it in. Scouts control behind the net. Scout control cross ice. Friese back on defense. Scout shot, save, Feeney. Wildcats for the zone with 1 minute left on the Nicholson penalty. Save Feeney. Cover Feeney.
Hello out there, around the year, it's hockey night tonight. Tension goals, the whistle blows, and the puck goes down the ice. The goalie jumps and the players come and the fans fall.
Kaiser under center. Miller clears the zone. Start of the third period. Alvarez under center. 48 seconds left on the Nicholson penalty. Friese, Miller, and Lee on the ice for the Wildcats. 2 minutes cross-checking. Scouts. Same four for the Wildcats. 33 seconds left on the Nicholson penalty. Scouts clear the zone. Miller controls. Advances to Lee. Lee along the boards. Loose puck center ice. Frizy controls. Frizy skates in. Frizy dumps in. Wernick now on the ice for the Wildcats. Scouts cross ice pass. Intercepted by Wernick. Miller broke up. Scouts dump in. Frizy controls behind the net. Kaiser now on the ice. Cross ice pass broken up. Frizy controls his own zone. Frizy clears his own zone. Scouts dump it back in. Miller controls along the boards. Miller to Kaiser. Kaiser neutral ice. Kaiser advances. Kaiser skates in. Kaiser along the boards. Chases behind the net. Kaiser controls. Kaiser to Nicholson. Nicholson to Brown. Brown center ice. Miller retreats. Brown back to Miller, back to Brown. Brown controls behind the net to Miller. Miller back to Brown. Brown to Miller. Miller to Wernick. Wernick to Nicholson. Nicholson broken up. Scouts clear. 35 seconds left in the power play. Neal now on the ice for the Wildcats. Brown advances out of his own zone. Broken up by the Scouts. Nicholson advances across the blue line. Scouts broken up. Nicholson in pursuit in the corner. Sorry, Neal pursuit in the corner. Brown controls in the corner. Brown and Nicholson. Nicholson advances, neutral ice. Crosses the blue line. Nicholson skates in, broken up by the Scouts. Wernick keeps it in, Neal at point. Neal to Brown, Brown shot wide. Wernick behind the net, battling. Wernick controls, Wernick shot, saves Scouts, loose puck. Scouts clear their own zone. Nicholson breaks it up, shot, saved by Feeney. Nicholson and Lee in the corner, sorry, Neal in the corner. Neal and Nicholson battle. Scouts control. Both teams are at full strength now. Neal controls along the boards. Scouts keep it in. Wraps it around to Neal. Neal in the corner. Nicholson battles. Loose puck. Wernick controls. Wernick advances. Wernick dumps it into Nicholson. Nicholson chases in the corner. Controls behind the net. Looks to center. Reverses. Back along the boards. Nicholson behind the net. Pass to Frizy. Frizy cross ice to Miller. Miller shot. Blocked. Kaiser along the boards. Wernick controls behind the net. Wernick centers, no one home. Frizy controls shot. Blocked by the Scouts. Scouts clear the zone. Icing Scouts. Veland and Lee on the ice now. Alvarez at center. Frizy and Miller on defense. Loose puck along the boards. Alvarez battles with Veland. Loose puck in the corner continues. Veland to Frizy. Veland controls. Veland dumps it in. Alvarez chases behind the net. Alvarez shot. Saves Scouts. Scouts control. Scouts clear their zone. Alvarez shot along the boards. Miller controls behind his net. Miller to Lee. Broken up by the Scouts. Evanston clears the zone. along the boards. Thielen dumps it in. Scouts control. Broken up by Alvarez. Scouts control center ice. Alvarez in pursuit. Loose puck along the boards. Thielen controls. Brown to Neal. Neal in his own zone. Cross ice. Lee controls. On defense, Kaiser, Warnick, and Nicholson. Wildcats to the power play, too many men on the ice for the Scouts. Nicholson controls, Neal at point. Neal dumps in, Nicholson in the corner. Nicholson looks to center, broken up. Scouts control. Scouts clear the zone. Brown and Neal in pursuit of the puck. Brown controls over to Neal. Neal cross ice to Warnick. Warnick advances. Warnick skates in, shot blocked. Scouts control, look to clear. Scouts clear the zone. Neal controls. Cross ice to Warnick. Warnick misses the pass. Scouts control in their own zone. Neal controls the loose puck. Cross ice pass broken up to Warnick. Neal controls. Neal in his own zone. Neal clears the center ice. Icy. Alvarez under center. Thielen and Lee at wing. Fries and Miller on defense. Alvarez wins the draw. Miller behind the net. Miller to Lee. Lee advances. Lee dumps in. Lee chases behind the net in the corner. Lee to Miller. Miller shot. Save. Scouts clear the zone. Scouts clear the zone. Feeney cuts it off. Miller controls behind the net. Reverses to Frizy. Frizy to Miller. Miller to Thielen. Thielen center ice. Frizy. Penalty coming up on the Scouts. Frizy dumps in. Pulled the goalie for Feeney. Two minutes interference, Scouts. Wildcats have a 2-man advantage for 10 seconds. Nicholson controls. Scouts control. Frizy keeps it in. Frizy to Kaiser. Kaiser skates in. Kaiser shot. Save, block. Now 5-on-4. Scouts clear their own zone. Frizy and Miller back on defense. Frizy controls. Frizy to Warnick. Warnick to Kaiser. Kaiser along the boards. Frizy keeps it in. Neal controls. Neal to Kaiser. Kaiser skates in. Kaiser leaves it for Nicholson. Nicholson shoots. Save, Scout. .114 left on the Wildcats power play. Nicholson controls, leaves it for Neal. Neal to Nicholson. Nicholson in the corner, behind the net. Looks to center. Nicholson controls. Nicholson controls. Leaves it for Brown. Brown controls along the boards. Penalty coming up on the Scouts for tripping. Nicholson controls behind the boards. Alvarez to Brown. Brown to Kaiser. Kaiser shot. Nicholson shot. Saves Scouts. Alvarez behind the net. Wernick behind the net. Wernick centering Nolan home. Scouts penalty, 2 minutes tripping. We gotta get a goal here. Wildcats 2-man advantage for 29 seconds. Kaiser at center. Nicholson at Wernick at wing. Neal and Brown on defense. Loose puck. Kaiser controls, dumps in. Scouts clear the zone. Brown controls. 10 seconds over a 2-man advantage. Brown stick handles in. Center's broken up. Neal keeps it in. Neal to Wernick. Wernick centers, back to Neal. Neal shot, broken up by the Scouts. 5-on-4 now for the Wildcats. For a minute 20 left in the power play. Neal controls center ice. Wernick leads for Nicholson. Nicholson skates in. Nicholson centers. Just misses Wernick on the centering pass. Scouts control. Wernick skates in. Wernick stick handles, leads for Brown. Brown to Wernick. Wernick cross ice pass. Kaiser looks to keep it in. Kaiser keeps it in. Nicholson controls. Kaiser at point. Kaiser to Nicholson. Nicholson skates in. Stick handle shot. Wide of the net. Kaiser along the boards. Neal. Wildcats penalty coming up on Kaiser. Back to Miller. Miller cross ice to lead. Scout control, cross ice. Scout control their own zone. Scouts advancing to the Wildcat zone. Lee in pursuit with Frizy centering pass broken up by Miller. Miller in the corner. Clear, Scout keep it in. Scout shot blocked. Trickles to the corner behind the net. Frizy controls, looks to clear. Scouts keep it in. Scout shot blocked. Loose puck behind the net. Stoppage of play. Feeney throws the puck. center. Brownlee and Neal on the ice. Shot wide. Scouts control. Scouts up in the center. Scouts control along the board. Scouts get in. Scout shot off the post. Scouts keep it in. Blocked by Alvarez. Scout shot wide of the net. Offsides. Line change for the Wildcats. Nicholson, Burnett, Miller, Frizzy on the ice. 47 seconds left. Power play for the Scouts. Nicholson controls center ice. Nicholson dumps in. Warnick along the boards. Puck tied up along the boards. Squirts free. Scouts control. Scouts advance out of their own zone. Miller on defense breaks it up. Nicholson controls behind the net. 10 seconds left in the power play for the Scouts. Scouts behind their own net. Scouts cross ice pass. Wildcats are now full strength. Kaiser back on the ice. Kaiser steals the pass. Kaiser skates in. Kaiser stick handles shot. Save the Scouts. Scouts clear. Miller keeps it in. Miller dumps in. Centering pass. Kaiser controls. Kaiser keeps it in. Nicholson chases the puck down in the corner. Nicholson behind the net. Neal on the ice now. Neal keeps it in. Centering pass to Neal. Scouts dumping in. Brown in pursuit. Strength. Nicholson controls out of his own zone. Broken up by the Scouts. Loose puck center ice. Puck squirts free. Nicholson cross ice to Brown. Brown advances to Kaiser. Kaiser on the board to Warnick. Warnick centering pass. Covered by the Scouts. Puck is played. Scouts behind the net. Scouts look to clear their zone. Offside.
It's gonna go down.
Timeout. Nicholson at center. Warnick and Kaiser at wing. Brown and Miller on defense. Brown sends it in. Scouts control behind the net. Along the boards. Miller looks to keep it in. Scouts clear the zone. Nicholson controls along the boards. Nicholson controls cross ice to Kaiser. Kaiser stick handles. Cross ice to Warnick. Warnick chases. Kaiser controls neutral ice. Kaiser dumps in. Scouts behind the net. Center ice. Brown in pursuit.